All right, good morning. We are going to start in Esther, and so Toby's going to read perhaps one of the more difficult passages in the entire Old Testament.
Yeah.
He's a sport, so thanks, Toby. We're on page what?
410, if you're using the Chair Bible. And I'm going to read Esther chapter 1, verses 10 through 12. Esther 1, starting in verse 10. On the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehudman, Biztha, Harbana, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger.
Wow, so Queen Vashti said no.
Yeah.
Interesting. What is that about? All right, so thanks for reading that, and I'm excited about getting in this. Before we get into this, we just want to review who we are, what we're about. This is Grace Life Bible Church. Our values are knowing God and His Word. It all starts there, right? And then we experience His grace through personal relationship. We simply believe He is who He says He is. We extend that grace. We grow in healthy relationships, which takes a few decades. And then we impact those near and far, 24/7, wherever we go. Now, knowing is important. John Stott has this quote. He says, "The good which the mind cannot discover, the will cannot choose, nor the affections cling unto." So knowing is important, but knowing should lead us to Jesus, right? So we are resilient disciples who are learning that spiritual maturity is about trusting more, not just knowing more. So we don't want to get stuck with just knowing. We have to know, but knowing leads us to Jesus. And you know where I'm going to go now, Matthew 5:39. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he says, "You search the Scriptures because you think in them you have eternal life, and yet it's the Scriptures that bear witness about me, and you are unwilling to come to me that you may have life." So Scriptures tell us about Jesus, and life is in Jesus, okay? So that's kind of what we're about here. And again, our values are knowing God, experiencing grace, extending it, growing in healthy relationships, impacting. And so we are making disciples. And discipleship is really more about presence, being present with Jesus, and less about performance. So abide, that word abide simply means to remain. Just stay with Jesus. The longer we stay with Him, the more we grow like Him. Okay, so that's kind of where we are, where we're going. And so the book of Esther, interesting. We want to know the book of Esther so we can trust God with seasons and situations where we don't think we can find Him. Seasons and situations where we don't think God can find us. Dark seasons, dark situations. Persia is a dark place, and this is where this whole story happens, okay? And so if you don't know when Esther happens and where it happens, you're not going to know what the book is about. So I'm forced to go into a little history mode here, okay? I'm just forced to. Anyway, so as you look at the Old Testament, the book of Esther it's the last book of the historical books. Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, and Esther is the last one of those. But the weird thing is, if you think chronologically, Esther is like the last book that happens in the Old Testament. By the time you get done with the book of Esther, everything else in the Old Testament has already happened. Okay? So it's at the very end chronologically, and so during Samuel and Kings, the prophets are doing their thing, and poetry, all that stuff. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at there. And so I need to review this. I've said this before a couple times, but in the ancient Near East, the way people thought was that gods are kind of tied to nations and physical places. So it was logical for them to think when we leave Egypt, well, we leave the gods of Egypt behind, Ra, Pharaoh, and then you go into the wilderness, and who's in the wilderness? There's not a lot of people there, but Yahweh took care of them in the wilderness. So they think of God Yahweh as he's the God of the wilderness. But then when they cross the Jordan River and get into Canaan, their natural thought is, well, this is the territory of Baal. And then when you go into Phoenicia, well, here they worship a different god. And Moab worships Shamash, and Syria worships a lot of gods, Ashur, and Babylon, Marduk. And in Persia, they worship Ahura Mazda. It's not a car, it's just the name of a god. And anyway, so Israel worships Yahweh. And in the story of Esther, we have a tension between the God of Israel and the God of Persia and the king of Persia and all that. So the deal is, here's the short story, I'll explain it. A bunch of Israelites were taken captive by Babylon, hauled into this area when Babylon ruled this area. And then Babylon falls to Persia. Cyrus is the new king. And when Cyrus became king, he released the people, 50,000 people, back to Jerusalem or to Judah. But a lot of them stayed in Persia. And Esther's family, Mordecai, those are among the people that stayed. And so the question is, because gods are kind of geographically bound, the Jews in Persia are like, are we alone? Is Yahweh here? Because he's back there. They're doing the temple back there. So that's kind of the broad quick thing. But let's just going to take you through a timeline. This is a broad timeline. We start with Genesis. You go through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers takes 40 years. Joshua takes 26 years. Judges takes about 380 years. And then you have the united monarchy, Saul, David, Solomon. And if this is new to you, just let it roll. Don't worry about it. But these are kings of Israel. And this is the united monarchy. And then Solomon dies in 931 BC. And then the kingdom splits into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And so from that point on, you have the 10 tribes in the north, that's Israel. 2 tribes in the south, Judah and Benjamin, that's the south. And so now we're the same thing here in this slide. Solomon builds the temple, and you've got 931, the split. In 722, Assyria was the dominant nation in that area, the ancient Near East. And God used Assyria to, look at the word up there, annihilate Israel. Nuked. Gone. They don't come back. They're just gone, okay? That's what's going on in us with that. And so a guy named Shalmaneser was responsible for that. And so then you've got Babylon, the next nation. Babylon takes over that area, the ancient Near East. They're the strong kid on the block. And in 612, they conquer Assyria. And Babylon, under the leadership of Nebuchadnezzar, you may have heard of this, there's deportations, or he comes in. He doesn't annihilate everybody. See the word down here? This is just exile. Would you rather take door number 1 and be annihilated, or take door number 2 and be exiled? It's pretty simple, right? And so they're exiled for only a limited number of years. But in 605, the dates don't matter. But well, not for us, but anyway, Daniel is taken captive and hauled to Babylon in 605, and then Ezekiel and Mordecai's family, not Mordecai, but his family, his great-grandfather, they're hauled off to Babylon about 597, and then in 586 in Jerusalem, the temple's destroyed, so this is this symbol that the temple's destroyed. Now here's a question: how long will the temple be destroyed, okay? That's what's going on with that. Here's the answer: 7 years. 2 Chronicles 36. God took into exile back in Babylon those who had escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and to his sons until the establishment of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days that it lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So here's like a math project. If the Sabbath is every 7 years, and you have 70 Sabbaths, you're looking at about 500 years. If you, from this point in history, if you go backwards, that lands you at the time of Saul. So what God is saying is that ever since Saul and the monarchy started, you as a nation have ignored the Sabbath year. And God is like, I want them back. I want them back right now. You don't seem to be able to obey me when you're in the land, so I'm going to haul you off and park you in Babylon and let the land rest. Now, there's spiritual reasons behind that. He's not just concerned about agriculture and nitrogen in the soil, but anyway, that was part of the Sabbath, is letting the land rest. Okay, now here, look at this verse. This is the very last verse of Chronicles. Now, the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. Look at that. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation. Again, let me just pause there. You see that? God is sovereign. He's doing stuff, but Cyrus is making decisions. Isn't that great? So you see that all over Scripture. They're both true. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. He made a proclamation, put it in writing, and here's his proclamation. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of earth, and he's charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you, all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go. Now, if you study Chronicles, the first 9 chapters, you don't make it through because it's just genealogies, right? But I mean, by the time you get to the end, this is brilliant because his whole plan is to motivate the Jews to go back to Jerusalem. And he ends his book with this. By the way, Cyrus, the king, says you can go. It's an A+ for how he arranges the whole book there. That's pretty cool, all right? Anyway, that's what Persia's doing. And so here's Persia. Cyrus is the king, and Persia takes over after Babylon. And under Cyrus, the temple is rebuilt, and look how many years it's been. Exactly 70, from 586 to 516. We're going down in numbers because this is BC, all right? And so the temple is rebuilt. But there's also, as there were 3 main deportations, there are 3 main returns. Zerubbabel leads the first return, and 50,000 people come back right about 538, right away. And then Ezra leads about 5,000 people, and Nehemiah leads some people, it doesn't say. But here's the thing I want to point out. Ezra 1 through 6 talks about Zerubbabel's return. The next part of Ezra talks about the second return. Where's Esther? I mean, Esther fits right in here. Esther is right in between these two. Esther happens right after 50,000 people leave, and they didn't leave. Esther, Mordecai, all these Jews, they're still in Persia, and because of that, how gods were thought to be geographically oriented, their burning question is like, are we alone? Has God abandoned us? All these kind of things, all right? And so, we'll get to that in a second, but here's just what's going on with that. This is from Ezra 6. Who is missing? They finished building the temple in 516 by the decree of God, by the decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. This temple was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius. Well, you look at that and like, I don't know who's missing. Well, here's who's missing. A guy named Ahasuerus. Because Ahasuerus is king right between Darius and Artaxerxes, but Ezra doesn't even mention him. That's weird. It would be like, well, one more slide. Let me show you this. Because in the story of Esther, there's nothing about the temple. Nothing. And Ezra has exclusive temple lens. He's writing about the temple. Temple, temple, temple. Yes, Cyrus, temple. Decree, Darius, temple. Artaxerxes, temple. But Ahasuerus, nothing. So he just skips over him. It would be like if you did a report on presidents that focused on foreign policy with Ethiopia or whatever. You'd be like, oh, well, this president, and then you skip them because this president does thing. And you would just pick the presidents that support your narrative about foreign policy with Ethiopia. It's just a random example. So it's not wrong. He's just like, he just doesn't need to talk about him. So anyway, what I'm saying is that the entire story of Esther happens right here after 50,000 people go back, okay? That's where we're at. All right, so because some Jews went to, let me get this. Yeah, there's Persia. Persia's just massive. Actually, Persia's 3,000 miles across. The United States of America is only 2,800, so it's bigger than the U.S., which is huge. And so Israel's this little tiny place, and then it's just massive. So the 50,000 Jews left. They go back. They're rebuilding the temple. They're getting the leadership back, the priesthood, the covenant. Meanwhile, in Persia, the Jews stuck in Susa, there's remarkable little prayer. There's no mention of Torah. God's name is never, ever mentioned in the entire book of Esther. That's odd. Seems to praise Ahasuerus. He's mentioned 190 times. Yahweh not once. What? Very strange, right? And so their central question, like, well, we're stuck over here in Persia. Is God with us? Can he be with us? Can he be in two places at once? Will he care for us? Will he protect us? I don't see him here in this land. In a land that doesn't name God, among a people that don't name God, is a story that doesn't name God. And yet his fingerprints are everywhere in the story. Okay? So, where can God be found? Where can you be found by God? You can be found, God can be found in places where you least expect to find him. God can be found in places you least expect to find him, and God can find you in places you least expect to be found. You're not alone. Even in dark Persia, he can find you, okay? So, fingerprints, right? Where is God? A fingerprint, what does it mean? It means somebody touched something, right? But not just somebody, a particular person, because they're unique. And so we see God's fingerprints all over the story. And so as we go through the series, I'll be building just these unique fingerprint things about how God is uniquely in behind the situation. And we'll build that as we go. But he is behind the scenes, and God is the hero of the story. Don't make the mistake of thinking we should be like Esther. You don't want to compete sexually to get the king. She had to. You don't want to kill out of revenge thousands of your enemies, and that's what she did. All right, and it's just an odd story, and so as we go there, we have to navigate it so we make sure we don't get sidetracked and stay on target, okay? But, okay, so Martin Luther actually didn't like this book. He was troubled by it, and he was thinking about the book of Maccabees and Esther, and he says this: I'm so hostile to these books, Maccabees and Esther, that I wish they didn't exist at all. I'm thinking, buddy, you might have missed some background that helps put the puzzle together. We revere Martin Luther, but he wasn't right on everything, right? And so I think he missed some pieces there that hopefully we can uncover. He thought it promoted Judaism too much and was too Gentile. You know, it's too Jewish because the Jews are killing all their enemies. That's uncomfortable. It's too Gentile because, again, I told you, 190 times Ahasuerus is praised, and he's the king. All right, his Greek name is Xerxes. His Hebrew name is Ahasuerus. Same guy, okay? So I might use that interchangeably. Doesn't mention Yahweh once. It mentions the Persian capital of Susa 18 times, Jerusalem only once. Susa is the winter palace because the summertime it gets really hot. Somebody say how hot? 140 degrees hot. Strabo is a Greek historian, and he records snakes and lizards crossing the street in the height of summer and literally roasting to death on the street. I'm like, okay, that's hot. Enough said. Anyway, so but Esther is too Gentile. You have Esther. The book of Esther is too Gentile. That was a criticism. She is forced to enter. She's a concubine in a harem to please the king, and it's just odd. And then there's this revenge and murder, and you're just like, what do we do with this? Esther is the only book missing from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's never referred to in the New Testament, and John Calvin never preached a sermon on it. Like, so what? But anyway, it's one of those things. You have stats, and it just sounds like, oh wow. It's still inspired. It's part of God's word, but it's very, very unique. And so we want to make sure we understand it. If you zoom out, I think it's comforting because one of the messages is no matter how messed up your life gets, you're not alone and God can find you. That's where we're going, okay? We could probably just close in prayer and go, but that's where I'm going to end up. Okay, so the book of Esther. Here are the characters. There's a guy named Ahasuerus, and his Greek name is Xerxes. And he's got a right-hand lieutenant man called Haman. These are Persians. Mordecai and Esther are Jews. Mordecai and Esther are cousins, daughter of his uncle. So anyway, that's who we're talking about. And so this is where the Persian kingdom, all the way to India, to Ethiopia. Let's go to verse 1. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ahasuerus, already 3 times, isn't that crazy? He sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for, and look at the list, all his officials and servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and governors of the provinces, 127 provinces, were there, while he showed the riches of royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days. 180 days. Okay, this is so interesting. This is one of those books that you really have to read slowly and notice in the text there's a lot of really weird, strange, unexpected stuff that's there on purpose that you have to not miss to make sure you don't misunderstand the story. Okay? So, 127 provinces in his third year. Do you think he struggled with control? I mean, not a personal struggle, but how do you control something 3,000 miles wide when you've got 127 provinces? How do you get, that's part of his problem, okay? So anyway, this Ahasuerus, his Greek name is Xerxes. He's the son of Darius. His dad Darius lost the Battle of Marathon to the Greeks. He wants revenge. That's one of his motivations. In the middle of Esther, he goes and he fights Greece again, loses again. He's best known for that. So, Susa, third year, 180 days. This 180-day party, you know, I remember first reading this thinking, like, I've been to parties before, like 2 hours, and I just pictured that for 180 days. I'm like, that's not, I can't imagine that. Like it's just like enough. But this isn't like that. This is it's a pep rally. It's a political pep rally and a prep rally because he's going to fight Greece. He needs all his commanders, his army, his royal officials. They're planning. He took 4 years to plan for this invasion of Greece, okay? So this is very focused. It's a political thing. It's not just a yeehaw party, okay? Planning sessions, and he's displaying all this stuff. With his nobles, officials, the army, everybody important is there. That's where he's going. Okay, and verse 5, when these days, the 180 days were completed or ended, at the end of the 180 days, he gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. A couple things here. It's not just the town, Susa. It doesn't invite everybody. It's Susa the citadel. It's the capital. It had a 2.5-mile wall surrounding it, 72 feet above the other parts. This is where the servants of the administration lived. So this is sort of like the Pentagon. It's just the whole, it's the military thing, but just those people in it that okay, so it's just Susa, not the town, but the capital and the Acropolis, the fortified area. He's inviting every servant, no matter how great or low you are as a servant, you are welcome to come to this party. And then look at this, verse 6. He goes into all this elaborate comments about the party. There were white cotton curtains. Wow. And violet hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple, and to silver rods and marble pillars. Also, couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement. And porphyry, it's alabaster, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds. And the royal wine was lavish according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Now, right, you're reading this, you're like, wow, this is just strange. It doesn't sound like a normal Bible verse. You know what I mean? I was doing some history research, and I found this quote. This is great. The Persians' predilection for drinking wine from sumptuous vessels is well attested in classical sources. That means they love to drink wine out of fancy goblets, okay? They're known for that. And if you get into the whole Persian wars, the way they fight, they literally hold gold couches and massive heavy things to the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Greeks are like, they're like the Navy SEALs, quick, deadly, and in and out. The Persians are like slow. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Somebody should make a movie about, okay, anyway, just saying. Already out there. But the king says you can drink as much or little as you like. You don't have to. And normal, the protocol was at a party, at a banquet in this culture, if the king drank, you drank. Every time you drink, you got to drink. And he's like, you know what? You don't have to follow that. And that's nice, but it's still odd that the king is like controlling how much or little you drink. So it's just interesting. Okay, who is a party for? Look back at verse 3. Officials and servants from Susa, the army of Persia, the nobles and governors from all the 127 provinces. They're all there, all right? Now remember, this is not just a party. He's looking ahead, planning this military invasion of Greece. He needs to make sure he gets the input, the buy-in, and plan with all his 127 governors and his 127 nobles and all these people. And then verse 9, Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. The women that belonged to. Okay, those are the concubines, okay? We'll get into that in a bit. So all this wine and curtains and all this stuff, it seems excessive, but it's important for us to understand this is not just a party. It's a political pep rally and prep rally to conquer Greece, all right? And that's where everything's coming together. The goal is not to elevate Ahasuerus, but to tell a story about his preparation for Greece. Verse 10, on the seventh day, at the end of that last banquet, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, which it probably always was, but he commanded Mehuman, Bithsha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abitha, Zestar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs, Toby read that, who served in the presence of the king of Ahasuerus, to bring Vashti before the king with her royal crown. Go get Vashti with her royal crown. Not just go get Vashti. It doesn't even say, and the king told a servant. Because a servant could go, hey, Vashti, the king wants you. He sends 7 state officials to do this. This is a state function. Getting Vashti with the royal crown is a state political function. It's not just, oh, it's time to eat, go let her know, okay? Here's a question we need to ask right now. I don't think I finished reading this. In order to show the people, that is the nations, the princes, her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. What does her beauty mean? Have not these Persians from 127 provinces seen a beautiful woman ever before? Like, oh, whoa, a beautiful woman. They've probably seen beautiful women. What does her beauty mean? What's going on? He's not just dumb and drunk. That's typically how we read it. Like, oh, what a stupid guy, he's just dumb and drunk. And no, he's more than that. Why is he doing this? He has a better reason. He has a plan, and it ties into his political pep rally and prep rally. Okay, so we already read that it was only his 3rd year in reign as king, and his kingdom is 3,000 miles wide. Here's how he got there. Okay, so way back when Assyria, 900 to 600 BC, this is Assyria's land in pink. It goes from the Persian Gulf over to Israel and just up a little bit. Now Babylon, the next kingdom, is bigger. Okay, here's Babylon. Babylon expands more and more and more, and then the next one, Persia, is just massive, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so Susa is the location of our story in Esther. It's the winter palace of the kings because it's hot in summer. But this is Persia. It's huge. And so he has a problem of how does he keep this vast kingdom, for it is vast? How does he keep together? How does he communicate? They got horses, and they're very fast, but 3,000 miles, 127 provinces, you are constantly going to be in ignorance of what's really going on in your own kingdom, and you're going to be plagued by insecurity. How do I know that all these provinces and governors are on board with me? And I'm planning this battle with Greece, and will they help? How much will they help? How many troops will? So this is what he's trying to get to, okay? So he invites all these middle-level managers into Susa for this political shindig, all right? He wants to make them glad they are part of Persia. He wants them to buy into the might of Persia, the glory of Persia, the power of Persia, and the beauty of Persia. So they are willing to fight and sacrifice for Persia. That's what's going on here. And that's where Vashti comes in. She represents the female fullness and version of Persia. She is Mother Persia. She represents the beauty of Persia. And she wants to enlist the devotion and the support from everybody present in this political rally. You know where this is going, right? She represents the king's agenda. And she communicates to all the visitors about the glories of Persia and why they should buy in. Except she says no. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command and delivered, look at how it says in verse 12. She refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the 7 eunuchs, delivered by the 7 state officials. She still refused. And the king became enraged and his anger burned. That's why he's angry. Because this is massive political shame. His entire program is at risk. If she rebels, maybe all is not well in Persia. Maybe Persia isn't beautiful and powerful and worth sacrificing for. He has to shut this down in a New York minute. We can't have her undermining what I'm doing here. Furthermore, we can't have other women undermining in far out places what I'm doing here. And that's where the text goes, okay? It's fascinating. So this is the first time. Ahasuerus and Vashti have a marital squabble. And if we ask the question, where is God? The first answer is, he is present in a marital squabble. Because this marital squabble sets the stage, it creates a vacuum for Esther to enter in, okay? So it's, maybe this is your take home because this morning was rough with your spouse. You're like, hey, God is in our marital squabbles, okay? Probably out of context, but anyway, all right. So that's what it means that she says no. She, a woman, is threatening the entire political program of the king, and they have to shut that down in a hurry. So verse 13, the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him being Karshena, Shephthar, Adamatha, Tarshish, Meres, Mersina, Mecumen, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, different guys than before, who saw the king's face, that's interesting, and sat first in the kingdom, according to the law, what is to be done? The king is saying, what do I do? What do I do with Vashti? She did this thing. Because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus, delivered by the state officials. That's what it says, delivered by the eunuchs. I had state officials ask a formal political request. She denied a formal political request, and my political plan is now in jeopardy. Wise men, what do I do? Okay. Memucan said in the presence of the king, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples, nations, who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be known to all women, causing them to look at their own husbands with contempt, since they will say King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him. She didn't come. Why do I have to follow you? Now, this isn't just neutral husband and wife relationships. This isn't the political agenda of we're going to go conquer Greece, and it's a sacrifice for me, the husband. I'm probably going to go off to war, and I might not come back. That in Persia, most of the citizens did not want to go fight Greece. They didn't want to. They already lost at Marathon. They don't want to do this. And so there's a real sense that probably the women, they're going to probably feel the brunt of the loss of this battle, economically, lose their husbands. They don't want this. And so if Vashti empowers them to, like, this is a stupid idea and you shouldn't go. And then the guys are like, oh, maybe, right? You can't have that. So that's what's going on here. Verse 18, I think, is that where we are? This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard the queen's behavior, they'll say the same thing to the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath and plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him. Let it be written among the laws of the Persians, the Medians, so it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before the king, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. Better? Better at what? Better at being Mother Persia. Better at selling the beauty of this whole political program. That's what we need, okay? And I love verse 20. So when the decree made by the king proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast. Isn't that interesting? These little comments, like, oh, by the way, it's huge. That's the problem, because he can't control all this, and so that's the stage of this whole thing, all right? So anyway, Vashti is moved from the queen down to a concubine living in the harem. That's just how that works. And then he says, the kingdom is vast. All the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low. That is, they can't rebel against this political agenda. The advice pleased the king, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, to every people in its own language, and every man be the master of his household and speak according to the language of his people. That is, if the man says Persia is the best and I'm going to die for Persia, don't argue with it. Okay? That's kind of where he's going. All right? In this, it says, interesting, the man will be the master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. Persia had a lot of different language groups, and the husband's authority was evident because the family would speak his language. Normally, the mother her native tongue would be taught among the kids and everything. Anyway, after these things, so the Greek War, the whole Greek War happens after these things, all right? And so here's Greece and here's Persia. They're fighting. Just once you get spatially aware of what's going on, there's sea battles, there are land battles, and everything else. And I'm going to come back to this. I'll just have to build this next week. But Ahasuerus' dad was defeated by Marathon, the Greeks at Marathon. He becomes king. There's rebellions he deals with. And we just read about Vashti. She's been fired, all right, part of the 180 prep rally. And then he goes off to war. And after he loses the battle with Greece, then Esther becomes queen. We'll get to that next week, but this is kind of what's going on. That's kind of how the timeline works, okay? And so, and we're in chapter 2. When the anger of Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti, what she did, what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men attended him, said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in the Susa citadel," that is the government palace area, "under the custody of Haggai," not Haggai the prophet, but Haggai, a different guy, "the king's eunuch who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given to them. Let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti." And this is what they did. So the terms concubine and harem in our culture have a very negative connotation. In this culture, they didn't. It was, a concubine is somebody that would be reserved for the king at his choice. He had up to 360 concubines, and he would choose out of them one to be the queen wife, and this is the context of Esther, okay? So all that to say, the Jews had missed the opportunity to go back to Israel. Many of them stuck in Persia. Now things are turning deadly. And the way they think, they're not invited to think God is even here. He's over there. He's back in Israel. So their looming question was, are we alone? Where is God? Can God find us here? Are we being punished for our failure to take that opportunity? Is God saying, "Ha! You missed the door. Good luck in Persia. I'm not there." And we listen to that and we're like, no, that's not what he says. But yet sometimes we feel that way. We feel like, I made this mistake, and now I'm just suffering the consequences. And there are consequences for mistakes. That's just normal. But when we start piling on the guilt and shame more so than God is thinking, that's when we've gone too far, and we start to think, God can't find me here. Look where I am. I can't see God here. That's a lie. God can find you wherever you are, and you can find God wherever you are, okay? You're not alone. And so we just finished the Gospel of Matthew. How does the Gospel ends with these 11 amazing words? "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." The end. I am with you. As you make disciples and people say thank you, I'm with you as you make disciples and they kill you. I'm with you. Okay? That's what he's saying. And so Esther, this is what we see. He is with you. His fingerprints are all over the story of Esther. We started off here with a marital squabble. God's fingerprints are on that because he's carving out space for Esther. What about your life? Can you see God's fingerprints in your life in a dark season when you're stuck in Persia and your prayers are not being answered? And by the way, unanswered prayers are a big deal, far too common. That just reminds us that his ways are higher than ours, and he's not all about what we're about too often. But we can trust him, all right? Can I find God in this place? Can God find me? And so God can be found in places where you least expect to find him. God can find you in places you least expect to be found. And so this means in the middle of your rebellion, in the middle of your addiction, in the middle of your just wholesale anger against God, he still loves. He still wants you to find him, and he wants to find you. He's empowered us with the ability to stiff-arm God and keep him out. Isn't that interesting? Just drop the arm and welcome him back, okay? We're not alone. And so this is a theme that's throughout Scripture. And so here are the questions that Esther is asking us, all right? In what situation do you need to see God today? Are you in a place or a season in which you need to be found by God? Can you see God's fingerprints in your life? And honestly, sometimes it takes a while to see the fingerprints. Reflection of time, reflection of years going by can help us do that. We're like, okay, I see what God was doing. And that's where it's important to remember what God has done. Because he did this thing back then. I heard somebody in my life group that, this thing happened and it was like 13 years long. Okay, let's trust God for his fingerprints in the lives of those we love or whatever situation we have. So I'm excited about this book, very unusual book. Next week, Esther enters the story. First chapter is weird, right? Anyway, we're done with that. Lord, thank you for this strange first chapter. Thank you that your fingerprints are on the marital squabble with Vashti, refusing and risking this big political agenda, carving out space for Esther to enter in. May we see your fingerprints in our own lives with disappointments and tensions and things that fall apart. We don't want to just panic and freak out and say that you're not loving or in control, but we want to slow down and trust you because we know you are trustworthy. Amen.